Hello, everyone. This is a video of me going to go through features of a science. So it's a pretty niche part of the specification. It's obviously in the research method section. There's a lot of terminology that you do need to know. Full disclosure, we are joined by Candice today,
Hello.
doing her nails for the second time in 24 hours. But we're going for a glittery purple this time.
We are going for glittery purple.
Glittery purple. There we go. So, where were we? There we go. Jesus, I've zoomed in on that a little bit. So when we're looking at features of a science, oh my god, you know what? Fine, deal with it. We've got this bit just here. So we're looking at objectivity, empirical method, replicability, falsifiability, theory construction, hypothesis testing, paradigm shifts. There's a lot of terminology that we do need to go through here. So I'm going to start off by asking the question as, is psychology a science? Um, uh, the philosophy students might want to take this apart in a philosophical way, but there is actually a definitive, actual answer to this. If we have a look here, this is a good representation about what science is. There is a hierarchy to science. So, psychologists will take the mick out of sociologists, for example, for being they'll say sociologists are a fake science that, doesn't actually contribute to society. But then biologists look down upon psychologists, chemists look down upon biologists, physicists look down upon chemists. So there is a hierarchy here, and there's a recognition that some sciences are more scientific than than other ones. So in order to be able to understand this more, we need to understand what a science actually is. So what you've got here is a diagram of the physical forces that act upon a car when turning right. Now, the point that you need to know from this is that these forces will act in the same way every time, in the same manner. They are replicable. They are observable. You can falsify them, as in you can prove them wrong. Science has to be all of these things, and this is why physicists, I guess, are they claim they are more scientific, because physics is easy to replicate findings. It's easy to observe the findings, generally speaking, apart from when you get to astrophysics. So if we have a look down here, science is basically about observing patterns of phenomena and making predictions on the basis of these phenomena before testing these predictions and hypotheses. Even if there isn't a space for you to write this in your book, I would definitely recommend it. The modern scientific method involves collecting data in a controlled, objective way. Now, as we go through this PowerPoint, I just wanted to keep asking, does psychology do that? Right? Does psychology collect data in a controlled, objective way? What do we think? What do we think? Do we think yeah? You weren't listening. Okay, that's a bit rude. I thought you were going to pay attention. Okay.
It does collect data in a controlled something way.
In a controlled something way, exactly. Well done. So this means that the process can be repeated. Now, here's where psychology does fall down a little bit. If we did Milgram's study 100 times, would we find the same findings 100 times? No, we probably wouldn't, because humans are a lot more erratic in our behavior than a car. This is what I mean. These forces act upon this car the same way every single time. Humans don't act the same way every single time. So there's an issue with psychology, because we're trying to make a science out of essentially what is chaos. We're trying to find patterns of phenomena in human activity. That's actually quite difficult, because humans are all over the place behaviorally, all over the place. So the first thing you need to understand here, according to the philosopher Karl Popper, great name. Let's not focus on that too much, but but a theory can only be scientific if you can falsify it. You cannot prove something right. Science isn't arrogant enough anymore to say that its theories are 100% correct. Because can we put our phones on silent, please, when we're doing this? Thank you. But we're you're worse than my students. We are. You've really thrown me now. You've really thrown me now. Karl Popper, thank you. So, a theory can't be proven right. You cannot prove a theory right. That's why if you ever say the word prove, I will cross it off, basically. I will cross it out of your work. You can prove it wrong, though. You can prove a theory wrong, but you cannot prove a theory right. Why can't you prove a theory right, Kieran? That's a very good question, random student. You can't prove a theory right because there's always a chance. There is always a chance that you've found freak findings. So you can prove it wrong, though, and that is by falsifying it. So, for example, and I would note some of these examples down. And by the way, the concept of God is actually an unfalsifiable idea, right? So the concept of God is not a scientific one. It's a religious one, obviously, but it's not a scientific one because you cannot prove God exists, but you cannot disprove that he or she exists. So that theory is unfalsifiable. Another, if you want a psychology example here, the best psychology example about a theory being unfalsifiable is the unconscious. So this is the idea that we have a part of us that we can't access. Now that's unfalsifiable because you can't see it. You cannot observe, and again, that's a key bit here. You cannot falsify what you cannot see. Again, write that down. However, a good example about a falsifiable theory that you do need to note down, and you may have looked at this, you may not have looked at this, it depends where you are in the year, but is the concept that dopamine, or rather high levels of dopamine, causes schizophrenia. How can we disprove or falsify that high levels of dopamine don't cause schizophrenia? We find someone who's got schizophrenia who's got normal levels of dopamine, and all of a sudden then you falsified the theory. So essentially, the first thing, a theory has to be falsifiable. You have to be able to prove it wrong. You have to be able to prove it wrong. That is different to proving it wrong. So, for example, that dopamine hypothesis is falsifiable, as in, if it wasn't correct, we would be able to see it. I think students think that we're saying that, but yeah, I won't go into it. So Thomas Kuhn also come up with this concept of the paradigm. So a theory also has to have a paradigm. So a paradigm is basically a common set of shared beliefs about the fundamentals in that field. Do psychologists have a paradigm? Do they all agree on the fundamentals of the field? Absolutely not. So if I just scroll back a little bit, we get to the approaches section, which hopefully you have looked at so far. In fact, you should have looked at so far. These are the 5, and by the way, there are a lot more here. There are a lot more than the 5, but these are 5 approaches to behavior. Now, not all psychologists agree on these. I believe in humanism. I believe in elements of psychodynamic approach, not the Oedipus complex, not this concept that we want to have sex with our mums. I don't really buy that personally. Do you buy that? Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, explains a lot. The biological approach, I don't think is that important personally. Genes, they exist, sure, but I don't think they're that important. Cognitive, I believe in, and learning approach. But you may disagree. So the point I'm trying to get across here is that psychology does not have a paradigm. It doesn't have a common set of shared beliefs that everybody believes in. So, for example, some people believe that nature is more important than nurture. Some people believe that nurture is more important than nature, for example. So, we don't have a common set of shared beliefs. But what I would point out here is that we are slowly getting them. We are slowly getting them. I think we are getting to the point where we can all agree that these are important. So, we all agree they're important now. Now we just need to agree which one of them is the most important and which one of those has the most influence, which one of these has the least influence. So I would note down a couple of examples here about where these approaches are starting to team up in terms of theory and treatment in order to be able to explain and help human behavior. So one thing I would point out here, cognitive neuroscience. That is a combination of biological and cognitive approach in explaining, like mapping out thoughts in your brain. It's crazy clever. You've also got CBT, which is the cognitive and the behavioral approach. So I would note a couple of those examples down. Now, while psychology doesn't have a paradigm, that thing I've just described is what's called a paradigm shift, where basically the original paradigm can no longer be. That's really strong, that one.
Sorry.
That's nice. That's right. Let's have a look. Okay, let me have a look. That's really strong. So the original paradigm can no longer be supported, and a new paradigm kind of comes in, and that's what's called the paradigm shift. So, for example, we did have a paradigm in the 50s. Everybody believed that cognitions were really important. In the 1950s, there was what's called the cognitive boom, and everyone for about 10 years believed in the cognitive approach. And then there was a paradigm shift. Then everybody believed in humanism. That lasted 20 years. Then you had the bio boom in the 1980s, where everyone started thinking that behavior is caused by biological. So there have been paradigms, but there's not one that everyone's agreed on, but they constantly get hit. So a couple of other things as well, a couple of quick fire terms you do need to know. So we've got what we had so far: a paradigm shift, falsifiability, but you also need to know about empiricism as well. So empiricism is basically when a theory is observable. When a theory is observable, it's a key scientific idea. You can't observe the unconscious, so therefore it lacks empiricism. It lacks scientificity, if you will. So empiricism, for something to be scientific, you need to be able to observe it, see it. We can see dopamine affects schizophrenia. We can see that. It's easy. Determinism is, I'm hoping you've got a good idea about determinism. Maybe you've covered it, maybe you haven't at the start of the second year. But determinism is the opposite to free will. Determinism is the concept that behavior is caused by something, right? It's like phenomena is actually caused, and if you can identify that cause, you can then predict if that phenomena is going to come across. So, for example, schizophrenia is caused by high dopamine. That suggests determinism. You haven't chosen schizophrenia, you haven't free willed it upon yourself, but that allows us to be able to predict behavior. So if you can find someone with high dopamine that doesn't have schizophrenia, you could then say, I predict you will get schizophrenia. So determinism is the concept that behavior or phenomena is caused by factors outside of your control. One of the last things I want to look at here is theory construction. It's quite difficult to do this without a whiteboard, to be honest. So I will just try to describe it. So you do need to know the basics of theory construction. You know, psychologists come up with theories and then they test them with hypotheses and studies, etc. Now, scientific one is one that can be rigorously tested. What I want to focus on is this bit here. All right. Well, this is definitely useful to know, and I'm not sure it's going to be in your workbook. There's two ways to come up with a theory. The first one is to go out and just do the research. Get the data, collect all the data together, and then form a theory from that data. So you go into the research or the study without anything. You just want to get, what are we going to find? What are we going to find? do the research, get the data, and then come up with the theory? Or do you observe behavior, for example, maybe see it, think, oh, I think this causes that, and then create the theory and then go out and test it? So there's two ways, and you need to know both those ways. It might be worth just rewinding a minute if you didn't get that. I think I described it. Thank you very much. So it might be worth just going back maybe a minute and just describing that. Do you get the data and form the theory from that data? Or do you come out of a theory out of the blue and then go out and test that? There's two ways to go about it. So as I say, it has to be replicable, right? You have to be able to go out and to see the behavior several times in the same conditions. For example, we don't have any. I've got a plant above us. There you go. It's a nice orchid. Wait, orchids? Do orchids photosynthesize? It's just leaves, isn't it? It's just trees, plants.
Yeah, but the orchid has leaves, and that's where it gets its energy from. It just has flowers as well. The orchid is the name of the whole plant.
So leaves. It's got leaves. There you go. It's got leaves. Photosynthesis happens every single time the sun hits the leaf or whatever. I don't really know how it works. But shut up. It's replicable. It doesn't like wake up one day, if plants wake up, and think, oh, I can't be asked to photosynthesize today. So the behavior is highly replicable. Is that the case in humans? No, because we're quite erratic. Objective, right? There's another key term here. Objective is basically, so in science, look at this. Science has no place for subjective views. Opinionated data. Science has no space for opinionated data, but psychology always uses subjective data because we have to get a lot of information from the participant. So to summarize, among other things, a theory is only scientific if it can be falsified. Good. If it has a paradigm, bad. Psychology doesn't have that. If it collects theories through empirical data, yes, psychology does do that. If it suggests determinism, yes. If it uses theory construction, yes. So psychology is mainly scientific. However, was that your stomach?
No. Oh.
That was a burp. Okay. Can you? Charming. However, is psychology science? No. It's a pre-science. Because we don't have a uniting paradigm, we don't have a paradigm that everybody agrees on. We are at the moment a pre-science, a before science. But once that paradigm has been formed, which it will in time, we will be an official science, obviously ahead of sociology. That's pretty much, well, that's not it. That's not it, actually. One thing you do need to know is pseudoscience, particularly in the context of psychology. Pseudoscience is fake science. If you go to most bookstores like Waterstones and go to the psychology section, they've just got a lot of self-help. That is not psychology, and that is not scientific. That is one person's idea about their 10 steps to a highly effective life. That's not scientific at all. So you have to be careful of subjective opinions about how to make your life better. That's not scientific. And then finally, you've got a few things here which are not scientific that claim to be scientific. So graphology, interpreting personality from samples of handwriting. Some police forces still use this. It's ridiculous. Right? Oh, they've slanted their writing, therefore they're a psychopath. What a knob. Reiki therapy is not scientific. It's not scientific. It's the healing massage of spiritual energies without ever touching the body. Although some people claim that it is scientific, it's not scientific
I
at all.
never said it was scientific.
Well, you did.
I believe you said Reiki, that's not a thing, and I said it very much is a thing.
I said it is a thing because I knew it from here, but it's not a thing as in like it's not like
I never
it's
said
not.
it was a science.
She did. She actually said those words. And clairvoyance, predicting future events. Again, people think that's horoscopes as well. Horoscopes, get over yourself. It's not scientific at all. There's no scientific nature to horoscopes whatsoever. So now the reason why this is important is because this came up as an 8 marker, the first ever research methods 8 marker this year at the time of filming. But it does raise this question: is the diagnosis of mental disorders scientific? Is it replicable? No. If I went to a doctor and said I've got hallucinations and delusions, one doctor could say it was schizophrenia. I go back the next day and one doctor could say it's schizoaffective disorder, which is completely different, or bipolar disorder, or God forbid, severe depression. So the diagnosis of mental disorders is not scientific because it's not replicable. You cannot observe depression. Not really. It doesn't have a paradigm. Not everybody agrees on the causes of mental health disorders, for example. So the diagnosis of mental health disorders is completely unscientific, as in basically it's guesswork. At best, it's guesswork. Now, the DSM tries to fix that, but does it do it well? Well, I'll leave it up to you. Now, this is the 8 marker that came up. Ask yourself, could you answer this 8 marker, discuss features of a science, so what are the AOs involved there, refer to one or more examples of psychological research in your answer, which you could pull in from anywhere, by the way. You could pull in the unconscious, you can pull in dopamine hypothesis, you could bring in Loftus and Palmer. There's a lot you can bring in. So that is pretty much it for this. There is a model peel just here, which it probably is worth reading actually, because this is that's quite a banging peel, if I say so myself. Yep, as always, hope that was useful. One of the more interesting parts of research methods, I think we can agree. But yeah, hope it was useful. Right, peace out.